Councillor Wragg, we are now live. Over to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's Virtual Planning Committee on 9th of September 2020. I'm your chairman, Councillor Eileen Wragg. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via live streaming. All participants today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded. So please bear this in mind throughout. May I remind you to be careful with your language, which I'm sure we all will be. Hold on, something just come up on my screen, that's better. We also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout the meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participants who are disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this planning meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all phones are turned off or on silent, and make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. Just a minute. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic blue hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone? And when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you've confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Amanda.
Councillor Wragg.
Present.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Desaran.
Present.
Councillor Gabbard.
Present.
Councillor Howell.
Present.
Councillor Key.
Present.
Councillor Pook.
Present.
Councillor Pratt.
Sorry, Amanda.
Councillor Skinner. Councillor Whibley.
Present.
And Councillor Woodward.
Present.
I can confirm, Chairman, that we are quorate today.
Madam Chairman, I didn't get my name called out.
You did, Councillor Skinner. I've marked you as present.
Or I done it without moving my lips then. That was clever. Okay.
Back to you, Chairman.
You're on mute, Councillor Wragg.
Sorry, that makes a change. The running order for today's meeting and the speakers list can be viewed under agenda item 1 on pages 4 to 5. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting on pages 6 to 9. If anyone has a comment on the last set of minutes held on 29th of July 2020, please do so by raising your blue hand. If I have no blue hands raised, I will take this as an indication that you all agree the minutes of the previous meeting. Philip Skinner, is your hand is still up? Is that to confirm your presence?
No, Madam Chairman, that's because I have a comment I want to make before we start the meeting, and I don't know at what point to make that comment, whether it be now would be a good time or later. It's up to you.
Well, you can make it now if you wish.
Madam Chairman, and it's an issue which I called you upon this morning. And it's not a personal issue towards me. It's a personal issue that was put at the full council meeting, at the last full council meeting that we held, that a Councillor Faithful, and I can say Councillor Faithful, made an accusation that members of this committee in some way did not declare interest in whatever it may be. Now, he did not actually identify any persons per se, but he said some members. What I'd like to know in going forward as your chairman of the planning committee, that the representation is not a personal representation for me. I was not named, and nor was anybody else named, but certainly there were accusations that there was in some way some wrongdoing. It is absolutely vital that this planning committee is seen, not only be seen, but is absolutely correct in its procedures and the way that it goes forward. And in the comments made by Councillor Faithful, I would like to think that you, Madam Chairman, would take them up with, and I will take them up with myself, as we have discussed this morning. I shall do that, and I shall take advice on that from Henry Gordon Lennox when I speak to him. But I'd like to think, as the chairman of the planning committee, that you would have all of your members' integrity in hand, and see that this committee, I'm sure you would, Madam Chairman, want to see that everything was all well and in the right place, and that we're all doing the right things at the right time. So I think it needs to be brought up, and I think it needs to be raised with Councillor Faithful through whichever channels you see fit. But as it went out into the public domain, and it did, then I think we have a duty to ensure that this committee is absolutely coherent in the way of its honesty, its integrity, in the way that we go forward. And I make that point at the planning committee. Thank you. Thank you,
Councillor Skinner. I really don't understand why you seem to have taken this somewhat personally, but I would say that if anyone has any issue regarding probity in this planning committee, that they go directly to the monitoring officer, who will then, if he sees fit, investigate it further. And that's all I'll say on that. So we go to agenda item 3, apologies, please. No apologies, I think.
Yes, we have had apologies. Councillor Kim Bloxham, Councillor Andrew Coleman, Councillor Kathy McLaughlin, and Councillor Jeff Pratt.
Fine, thank you very much. Oh yes, Jeff Pratt did send an email through this morning. Yeah. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest? Excuse me.
I'll do this by roll call.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'll go to Councillor Brown.
Yes, I've got an application 20/1049, and for that I will be leaving the room.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Sorry to interrupt. I couldn't unmute in time. Councillor Brown, could you please just clarify what your interest is?
I'm the owner of the property.
So it's a disclosable pecuniary interest.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
No declarations of interest.
Councillor Davey.
No declarations.
Councillor De Sarum.
Yeah, declaration on item 20/0842/full, the Littleham one. I am a town councillor and the ward member for Littleham. I have no peculiar interest, but that is a declaration as a town councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Yes, item 20/0842/full, Exmouth Littleham. I'm an Exmouth town councillor.
Councillor Howe.
Yes, I'll declare an interest on 21/482, as the officer concerned is very well known to me, and I do not feel able to. I feel I could not make a judgment against him, if you get my meaning, so I will not be taking part. But it is purely a personal interest.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yes, Wendy, 10/49, I am the joint ward member of that application.
Sorry, which application was that date, Councillor Key?
10/49. Mr. Brown, Mr. Colin Brown's application.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Pook.
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Skinner.
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Whibley.
I am a town councillor in Exmouth, so with regards 20/0842.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, Exmouth town councillor, so far that is relevant.
Yeah, I'll just chip in there and say I'm also an Exmouth town councillor, but it's not my ward, so I didn't feel it was necessary to declare, but I have no other interest than that.
And that was for application 20/0842.
Yeah, same one, Exmouth Littleham. Yes, but I'm not the ward member.
Lovely, thank you. And finally, Councillor Ragg. Are you on mute, Councillor Ragg?
Sorry. Yes, no declaration of interest.
Thank you, and that's the end of the declarations.
Thank you. Right, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency. Confidential items 6. No confidential items or exempt items. Agenda item 7. Planning appeals statistics, pages 10 to 25. Mr. Rose, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, so you'll see since the last meeting, there's been 14 appeal decisions. 3 of those have been allowed and 11 of those were dismissed. Just focusing on those 3 that were allowed. One of them, the first one on there, relates to Pendor at Colleton Raleigh. Members may remember that came in front of committee, and it was considered that the site was in an unsustainable location because Colleton Raleigh doesn't have a built-up area boundary or adequate services and facilities to be considered to be sustainable. So hence it's not included as a sustainable settlement in the local plan. But you'll see the inspector felt that despite that there were enough facilities in the area for that application to be considered acceptable. I don't necessarily agree with that decision as an officer, because I think it's contrary to the local plan and the work that went into that, identifying what locations were sustainable and which weren't, but that's the decision the inspectors made. The next appeal lost was to do with a listed building where there was considered to be harm to the listed building and its features. But again, whilst the inspector accepted that there would be some change and alteration to the building, they didn't feel that that was harmful enough to cause or wasn't harmful enough to dismiss the appeal. And the final one, the third one that was lost, relates to Ottery St Mary. It was under policy D8 that allows the conversions of buildings outside of settlements to residential use. In this instance, officers felt it was too far from the settlement to be sustainable, but the inspector considered that that it was an acceptable distance, an acceptable walk, and therefore allowed that appeal. So say the other 11 were dismissed, which is good and welcome. And just for members' information, you'll recall that the appeal that the application at Liverton for the gas-powered standby.
Yeah. Hello?
Frozen up, I think, by the looks of it.
You've frozen, Chris.
Am I back?
Yes, you are back now.
Sorry, I got totally kicked out of Zoom. Right. Is everyone else back?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay, right, sorry about that. Yeah, so Liverton, the gas-powered standby generation facility, went to committee, got refused. The concerns with sustainability. The inspector allowed the appeal, but just to advise members that a third party has submitted a judicial review against the decision of the planning inspectorate. So that is now go before the High Court to determine whether they are willing to accept and consider that JR. There's 3 grounds that the third party has brought. One is that the inspector gave too much weight to national energy policy and that policy is dated. That if that national energy policy is relevant, that the inspector failed to apply it properly. And thirdly, that they felt that it was a breach of natural justice that the application was dealt with by way of written representations. So that will be before a judge at some point, and I'll update you on the outcome of that as and when it goes through the High Court.
Thank you, Chris. Are you able to say who's brought the judicial review?
I am. It's an individual. Shirley might know off the top of her head. I'm just trying to see if I can find out.
It's all right. In the meantime,
yes,
yeah, carry on, Shirley.
It's a private individual, Mr. Dunn.
All right. Okay. Thank you. On the Pendle one at Colton Raleigh, if I remember rightly, Colton Raleigh didn't have a neighbourhood plan. Is that right, Chris?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, you know, maybe something that parish council might consider. I don't know whether they're working on one at the moment. But certainly it would give them some sort of protection there if they did have one.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that, Chris. Now we go to agenda item 10, and that's the planning application 200842 for land adjacent to the meetings, Mayor Lane. I'd like to welcome Mr. Yestin John, speaking as the agent. Is Mr. John here? Is he in the waiting room or is he in the meeting?
Yeah, I'm present.
Thank you. Okay, welcome to the meeting, Mr. John. I hope I got your Christian name right. Is it Yestin?
Close enough. Yestin, yeah, thank you.
Well, my mother was Welsh. I should get it right, shouldn't I? Anyway, you'll have the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes after Mr. Rose has given his presentation. Okay, off you go, Mr. Rose.
Thank you. I'm just hopefully you can see my shared screen.
It's coming up.
It is coming up. Good. So we've got an application here for conversion of an agricultural building to a dwelling, and there's also related to that. Oh no, sorry, my computer's not behaving. Just bear with me.
Madam Chairman, just before Chris starts, I'm sorry to butt in, just before you start, Chris,
Yeah.
the buildings opposite the meetings, Mayor Lane, I lived at Mayor Farm as a child for many years through my youth. I think at this point, Madam Chairman, I'd like to declare an interest, although I know no parties of who owns it or whatever it is, and I've no discussion with them. I'm wondering at this point whether or not I actually ought to be declaring, well, I certainly ought to declare an interest, I think. I think that I'm wondering whether or not I ought to, I wonder if I could take advice from Shirley. When I left Mayor Farm when I was 24 years old, when I got married, I'm 60 now. Do I stay or go?
I would say that if it was an old accommodation address for several years, you have no knowledge of anybody that currently resides or is close by, then it is for you to decide whether to declare a personal interest, but it isn't, I wouldn't suggest that it was necessary.
Okay, I'm just making the point that I lived at Mayor Farm as a child from the age of 5 until I was 24. So I'm just making that point. Okay, I think I'll just leave it to that and I'll stay. Thank you. Sorry, Madam Chairman. Chris, carry on.
Thank you. Okay, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so this is a conversion of an agricultural building to a dwelling, and there's a related parking and garden area proposed. The application's before members as there's an objection from a ward member. So as you might be able to see from the screen, the application relates to this building here to the south of Mayor Lane. So this is the building to be converted, garden area and a parking area for the adjoining property. The south side of the lane is in the AONB and coastal preservation area. And the buildings to the opposite side of the road are outside the AONB, but they have been, some of them have been converted to dwellings under a prior approval and a separate planning application. And this bit of red line here is proposed as a parking area for the meetings, which is a property adjoining the application site. You'll see from the report that there's no third party representations, there's no objection from County Highways, no objection from the landscape officer or the AONB team. So this is a better layout, so you can see the buildings opposite that have been converted, and this is the application site here, and this property is the meetings, which is a residential property already down there, and this is the proposal for the conversion. So the existing building, the meetings stays, and they convert the barn with a small extension on the rear to residential use. They use an existing access off here to retain access to a farm and to get access to their parking area and a rear garden. And then they're proposing to use a separate farm access gate to create access in through to the field and the gravel parking area for 2 cars for the meetings, because at present the meetings use the application site to park their vehicles. So we've got a typical sort of barn layout at the moment, and then they're proposed with the main living accommodation, as you can see, living area and kitchen downstairs, and then there's the roof plan with a couple of roof lights. So these are the elevations at the moment. Agricultural barn building in need of a bit of work, but not much. Certainly it could improve its appearance by being converted. And these are the designs of the converted building. So quite sympathetic, using existing openings, retaining the stone, the roof, and having some wooden cladding. And that's the rear elevation. Again, trying to use as many of the existing openings as possible. And this is the building you can see here. So you can just see the meetings in the background. So the application site relates to this agricultural building here, not in a certainly structurally capable of conversion, but certainly could do with a bit of attention. So this is the access gate that will go into the parking area to the rear and to the rear garden. And this is the other farm gate that would lead into 2 parking spaces for the meetings, which is that property there. So this photo is taken from where those 2 parking spaces would be. And this is a photo up the road showing the properties already converted to the left and the application site, to the right and the application site to the left. So the applications, in terms of the principle of development, the applications in the countryside, there's no the neighbourhood plan for the area says that it will support development within the built-up area boundaries, but outside of that, it reverts to the local plan. The local plan has policy D8 in it that allows or supports the reuse of rural buildings and where they are well located, and it's subject, D8 is subject to a number of criteria, as you'll see in the report. So the first is that it's fairly close to a range of services and facilities. In this case, the site's about 160 metres from the built-up area boundary of Exmouth, and obviously Exmouth has a large range of services and facilities. So the site's considered to be, albeit 160 metres down the lane, it is in a sustainable location, and policy D8 is there to allow conversions of buildings where they are well located but outside of a built-up area boundary. So it's considered to be a sustainable in terms of policy D8. The second criteria to policy D8 is that it should be capable of conversion. The building is structurally sound and capable of conversion. Third criteria relates to design and visual impact. As you could hopefully have seen from the elevations, the original form of the building and the design and the materials are being retained. The site isn't, from distance view, the site isn't highly visible. And it's considered that the proposal will have minimal impact on its design and will actually improve the appearance by bringing the building back into use and having investment in it. The fourth criteria relates to impact on the AONB in the coastal preservation area. The requirement of the AONB is to conserve and enhance the AONB. There's only a local impact here. There aren't any wider views, so the only views of the site really are these close range views from the lane. So that any impact is local. The buildings opposite have already been converted quite sensitively, and again we have a sensitive conversion proposed as part of this application. And given the appearance of the building at the moment, it's considered that a sensitive conversion will improve the appearance of the site in the AONB. There are the two elements of extending the site through the garden and the two parking areas off the access gates. They will have a visual impact, but again, only through those gates, and there's no wider visual impact, and there's no objection to them from the AONB team or the landscape architect, and those parking areas, as I say, will be screened and using existing accesses. There's no loss or impact of agricultural land, and the neighbour impact is considered to be acceptable. There's only one window on the opposite side facing the meetings, and that's to be a ground level and obscure glazed. And there's no highway safety concerns. The visibility space are considered to be acceptable, and there's 2 spaces proposed for each dwelling. So in conclusion, it's considered the proposal complies with policy D8 in terms of its location, in terms of the sensitive design, and it's considered that the reuse of the building in this sensitive way will improve the appearance of the site and therefore this part of the AONB at close range. And there's not considered to be any harm from parking or any other harm that can be identified. So due to that, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Mr. John, would you like to speak now? You have 3 minutes and 30 seconds before your 3 minutes is up. You'll have a warning that time's coming to an end.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can all hear me okay.
Yes.
The scheme before you proposes a very carefully designed proposal. If approved, it will secure the future of an attractive, traditional but disused building which is in need of a long-term use. The proposals will have no adverse impact on the character of the area. Rather, the scheme will generate an improvement by allowing the restoration of the building, the condition of which is already starting to decline. Although an extension is proposed, this is small in size and will be of a traditional design, wholly complementary to the character of the existing building. The extension will be located at the rear of the building, but not be visible from any views within the surrounding area. As your officer's report notes, the property is very well related to other houses and buildings and to Exmouth as a whole. It is adjacent to an existing house, the meetings, and to the complex of 6 existing dwellings made up by Mare Farmhouse and its associated converted farm buildings. It is a very short walk via footpath to the built-up area of Exmouth, and a conversion would not therefore be seen as out of place or set an unwelcome precedent to the council. The access and car parking arrangements required to serve the conversion would be based around the existing arrangements, with few additional alterations needed, and only a very small length of hedgerow needing to be trimmed back, but not removed. It is acknowledged that a small additional area of car parking is proposed to the north of the existing house, the meetings, and this is proposed to allow for the first time properly provided and designed car parking for that house. The applicant has taken care to reduce the land take and visibility of this part of the overall scheme, and to this end, the amount of parking proposed is the minimum acceptable, and this will be sited as close as possible to both the road and the meetings as possible. The parking area would be screened by the existing mature hedge, which runs along Mare Lane and would be enclosed by a simple post and rail fence and surfaced with gravel. The width of the verge along Mare Lane means that, as with the southern access point, there will be no need for any hedgerow to be removed. As your officers have already noted, it's notable that no concerns have been expressed by either the council's own landscape officer or by East Devon AONB partnership. There are no other concerns expressed from other technical consultees, and this position provides further confirmation in our view of the scheme's acceptability. Given the above, the proposal clearly complies with the council's own policies for the reuse of redundant rural buildings, and I very much hope you'll feel able to support your officer's recommendation and grant plan permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. John. Now we have one of the ward members, Councillor Hookway, who wishes to speak.
Yes, Chair. Morning. Yes,
you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, okay. Right, my objection to this application really does stem around the issue of the area of outstanding natural beauty. As we all know, we have two of these areas within East Devon, and they are, I think, critical to our perception of what makes East Devon an outstanding place and what other people consider East Devon to be and why it's an outstanding place. Now, having sat on DMC as it was last year, I gained a very strong understanding from officers that any application within an AOB must be of an outstanding quality. And so my first question is to the committee, do we consider this application to be outstanding? Now, I'm not going to make a judgment on that point, that's for the committee to decide. I'm very surprised that officers have not used as a starting point for their deliberations Strategy 46. And I question whether Strategy 46 has been given sufficient weight in determining this application. And if I quote from Strategy 46, the point that concerns me is, it states, I quote, "Great weight will be given to conserving and enhancing the natural beauty, and major developments are only permitted where it can be shown that it cannot be reasonably accommodated elsewhere outside of the area of outstanding natural beauty." So my question is, how does this application meet Strategy 46? Does it conserve the landscape? Does it enhance the landscape? Or, as I think perhaps it may well do, does it undermine the character of the landscape? Would not the visual impact of this application, especially when one looks from the west, be unacceptable, and therefore would not harm be caused to the area of outstanding natural beauty? Across the valley from this application, that's the Mare Valley, is the residential area of Littleham, which includes Douglas Avenue and Plum Park. Now, very regrettably, photographs showing the location of the Mare Valley to Douglas Avenue and Plum Park and Littleham have not been presented to the committee. Perhaps those of you who have access to Google Earth could have a look at that, because that gives you a much clearer picture of how close this development is to the Littleham ward. So, along with Mare Farm on the other side of the road, does this application actually represent a form of creeping urbanisation? Could it lead to an extension of the Exmouth built-up area boundary? And what concerns me is that if this application is approved, would it not set a precedent for further developments in the Mare Valley on both sides of Mare Lane, which would be contrary to the Exmouth Neighbourhood Plan Policy EN1? Thank you, Chair. Those are my points.
Thank you, Councillor Hookway. Right, committee. Councillor Skinner, your hand is still up. Is that from last time?
I can, and I can speak. I will speak. I was going to let others speak first because I thought Councillor Desarum was a ward member, so I was assuming he was going to speak.
Okay, Councillor Desarum, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very gracious of you. Most of you will have by now have had the opportunity to have read my comments made on page 51 of the document pack in support of this application, in keeping with the recommendation of the report itself. Therefore, having heard the most recent planning advice given today about this application, I'd like to propose approval. I'd like to say my reasons for this are that I accept all the arguments put forward for approval, noting specifically the following 5 issues. Firstly, the fact that the boundary itself is approximately 106 metres southwest along Mare Lane and approximately 310 metres to the northwest via a public footpath, which I think that I've used myself, as I mentioned in the report, which, as it says, enables it to meet policy D8 in terms of access to services and facilities, which is the key point. Secondly, I note that there will be a condition imposed to ensure that the materials used to construct the extension match in type and texture those of the rest of the development, which again is satisfactory. Thirdly, the AONB team, as we've heard, has not objected, nor has the council's landscape architect. Fourthly, there'll be no impact on neighbours because permitted development rights will be withdrawn, as it says in the pack. Fifthly, the wildlife survey was okay, so again there was no issue on this point. Therefore, whilst I've heard the arguments put forward about creeping urbanisation to the BUAB, I think that, as it says on page 60 of the report, the proposals accord with all the elements of policy D8 of the local plan, and this is why I'm going to recommend approval today, subject to obviously a seconder coming forward. Thank you so much indeed, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor De Sarum. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, I'm quite happy to second that, Madam Chairman.
Thank
Councillor
you.
David Key, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Key. I'm going to call Councillor Joe Wibley next because he is an Exmouth Town Councillor as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank Councillor Hookway for his objections, but I do think that the development is relatively sympathetic. It's well contained and it is just in an area of natural beauty. And you know, I think the fact that it's disused is fairly crucial. It's disused at the moment. Because when we see buildings like this, often we of this type, we don't consider any, if we don't consider any development to be appropriate, they'll go to rack and ruin. And as for the issue of, as Councillor De Sarum said, the issue of sort of increasing development of the valley, it's an existing building. It's not as if we're creating many more. So yeah, so long as the plans are followed carefully, I propose acceptance as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wibley. And Councillor Davey, another member from Exmouth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a sensitive conversion. It's not altering the outer fabric of the building very much. The extension proposed is quite small, so I think this is a good development. Yeah, it's not a development in the open countryside, is it? It's a conversion of a disused agricultural building, which I think has slightly different criteria. I did have an issue with one of the statements in the report, which was that it was relatively easy proximity to a bus stop in Douglas Avenue. And I would just make the point that actually, although it may not look it on the map, that is quite a steep valley down and across a rather rickety little bridge and up the other side. I've quite often walked that. As my wife said the other day, it's not for everybody. I would hope that the occupants would use it, but I think realistically we have to accept that this is probably going to result in further car journeys. So I would have some issues with the sustainability. Councillor De Sarum has said the ecology report didn't highlight any issues. Actually, I've read that report. It's very thorough. And in my opinion, an excellent report. It has noted some bat droppings, which suggest the presence of serotine bats, I think it was. So I note that in the conditions, it says that ecology report should be adopted. I just wanted to ask Mr. Rose what the status of that ecology report is. does that mean that all the conclusions in the ecology report, including provision for bats, and I think there was bird boxes as well, all of those are accepted? And I've one final question about the pathway from this building up to Douglas Avenue. Is that actually a public right of way? Could it be closed off at some stage, or is it actually a public right of way?
Thank you, Chairman. If I come back on those, yeah, I believe it is a public right. It is a public right of way. And with regard to the protected species report, yeah, the condition in effect means that those recommendations, the mitigation that's in that report, need to be carried out by the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. And the last
you.
one from Exmouth is Councillor Tony Woodward.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've been past them many times, and I've often thought, well, that's just going to rack and ruin. It has a certain derelict charm, but I think the changes will actually enhance the landscape. I don't want to repeat what everybody else has said, but I'm very much in favour of the proposal and the office's recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. It's all been said, but like Councillor Davey, I was pleased to hear that the bat boxes and the bird issues will be taken on board by the developer. But will that be checked out by planning to make sure it is done, please?
Mr. Rose?
Yeah, I can. If members grant consent, I can ask the enforcement officers for the area to keep an eye on that. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Key, your hand is still up. Did you want to come back on this?
Yes, I did, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much. Yes, I went and had a look at this. I've been and seen this building, and I do think that the design that the architect has put forward is very attractive. I do think that it's in keeping of the area. What did amaze me was one of the ward members in actual fact said that looking across from the other side of the valley, it could be seen, well, that unless they're very tall or something, because I stood at that building and all I could see was the building virtually opposite. So I don't see, you might have been able to see probably about 10 foot at the end of it through the gateway leading into the development opposite. But no, I mean, I think it's very attractive. It's a barn that needs refurbishing because sadly over the years it's had wear and tear. But I think, you know, the architect has done a very good job on it. And I fully support it and second the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. And Councillor Skinner.
Least but not last, it seems. I think everything's been said, Madam Chairman. I'll just leave it to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a proposer to approve, Councillor De Sarum, seconded by Councillor Key. Shirley, can you sum up, please?
Yes, members, you have before you a motion in two parts. The first part is to adopt the appropriate assessment forming part of the report and approve with the conditions as set out in the report. If you would please indicate whether you support the recommendation or against the recommendation, or whether you are abstaining when your name is called, please.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Support.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Davey.
Support.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Support both points.
Councillor Pook.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Support.
and Councillor Bragg. Apologies.
Approved, yeah.
I could confirm that motion has been carried.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. John, for coming along and presenting your case. Right. Planning application 20-065246 Willoughby House, Peak Hill Road, Sidmouth, age 64 to 74. Now we have Mr. Cooper. Is he here?
He is present.
Thank you. Welcome to the meeting, Mr. Cooper. You will have 3 minutes to speak after Mr. Rose has given his presentation. Thank you. Mr. Rose. Hello. Is anybody there?
Yeah, you're there. You're there. We're there. Chris, are you there?
Sorry, yes, I'm having a bit of technical problems at this end. Bear with me. I'm just
Don't fail on us today.
Could I just ask that all members please check if they've muted their microphones? We're getting feedback. Thank you.
right. Hopefully, there we go. Sorry about that. It's been a bit slow today. Must be my internet connection. Yeah, so application 6 Willoughby House. We've got application and for changes to this property that involve a terrace, an access bridge, balustrades, new door and roof lights, and it's before committee because there's an objection from the ward member. Now, the application site itself comprises 6 apartments, and the application relates to one of those apartments. And it's in the AONB in the coastal preservation area, just off of Peak Hill on the outskirts of Sidmouth. So you can see the location of the flats here, and they have a shared access through which go to the adjoining property, which I will mention in a minute, and the relationships with that. In terms of the designs of the building, it's a very attractive building with a very ugly 2-story side extension, as you'll see from the photos. These are the existing elevations, and the proposals are to put sort of Juliet balcony glass balustrades on top of in front of these windows at the roof level, to put a balcony area on here, so balustrades to the front, and then when you go around the side, there's a high level screen. There's a door proposed in the side to access that terrace area, a couple of roof lights, and then you can see this walkway that's proposed to the rear to access the rear garden that's on a slope. So it's this bridge in effect to create access from the flat to their rear garden area. So there you can see the terrace that's proposed on top of the flat roofed extension, and then the walkway out to access the slope and the rear garden. So this is the property, as I say, very attractive property in itself, but with this very unsympathetic 2-story flat roofed extension. And as I say, the proposal is for some glass balustrade across these upper windows, and then to have balustrade in across the front of this element here so that they can create a balcony area. And then they would have privacy screens on the side and rear going back here. And then the walkway would come out of this window along this flat roof part of the extension across here, and then access up into their rear garden area, which you can see there. And this is the relationship to the property, or this is the property next door, which I'll mention in a minute. So the main issues are the visual impact from the proposal being in the AONB and the impact on the amenity of the adjoining residents. In terms of the visual impact, the proposal is in an elevated position, but views of the site from the public domain are quite limited, and mainly limited to some glimpse views through Peak Hill of the opposite side of the building to where the balcony is proposed. There's only small areas of glazing proposed to those windows, which aren't considered to be harmful to the area. And in fact, the glazing and balcony that's proposed to the flat roof 2-story extensions, considered that could well enhance the appearance of the building. So it's not considered that the proposal would be harmful to the A1B or the coastal preservation area. In fact, as I say, maybe some feature around that unsympathetic 2-story extension could be argued to enhance the appearance of the building. With regard to the neighbour impact, originally the privacy screens that were proposed on here came in at 1.5 metres high. That's now been increased to a height of 1.75 metres, so that people sat or in this area, if they're looking back to the left in this picture towards the closest property, if they're in that area, there wouldn't be any detrimental levels of overlooking back to that property. 1.75 metres high has been chosen because that's the height at which when permitted development rights kick in. So there's a relationship there between what people can do under permitted development rights and what's considered to secure an adequate level of privacy. In any case, there's 28 metres back to this the main dwelling from the balcony area. There are a couple of slides, apologise, I've put in here that might be not in your pack, to show the relationship from the neighbouring property back towards the balcony area. So this here is where the balcony area would be. So there'd be a 1.75 high privacy screen along here that prevent overlooking back towards this property. And again, you can see here, this is where the privacy area screens would be, and they would have this walkway back over here to gain access. Now, it's not considered that there's any concern in terms of the walkway because it isn't a sitting out area. It'd be used infrequently, and it's not considered there'd be any greater overlooking from that walkway than there are from the existing windows that are in the side of that the flats next door. And also, this is the view of the neighbour's property. So again, there would be a balcony area here. They would be able to potentially look over the front of the balcony, but as you can see, there are already a number of windows that overlook that garden. So it's not considered that we'd be able to justify a refusal of permission on the basis of overlooking from the front of the balcony, particularly as we're putting privacy screens on the side there to protect direct overlooking back to the house. So subject to those privacy screens going in, it's considered that the application will have an acceptable visual impact and wouldn't be harmful enough to the amenity of neighbours to justify refusal. So the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Eileen, you're
I'm afraid you're muted.
Sorry. Mr. Cooper, would you like to speak now? You have 3 minutes and you'll have a 30-second warning before your time is up.
Chairman, although Mr. Cooper is present, he's unwell at the moment, so I'll be reading it on his behalf.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for inviting me to prepare a statement, but apologise for being unable to present in person due to health reasons. We have resided for 24 happy years at Harmony, the neighbouring property most directly affected by the above application. In contrast, Flat 6 was purchased last summer and is currently back on the market for sale at an inflated guide price, which begs the question, why does the applicant still require such an unwelcome extension? The terrace walkway and bridge application came as a complete surprise and to us represents an unacceptable intrusion into our privacy as described in my letters and photograph opposing the above application. Due to its dominating position, the terrace would impact in an unneighbourly way upon our amenity and living conditions with sight lines directly into the rooms and garden of our property. Refer to policy PPS 7A27. Due to the orientation of the Harmony House, there would be an obstructed views directly into our bedrooms, lounge, entrance lobby and kitchen, upper and lower gardens. See sightline images in officer's report. Looming over the driveway like a watchtower, an intruder would be able to monitor our movements to and from our home, raising a fear of crime and for our security. Although it fails to adequately address the extent of the visual invasion, the officer's report indicates that overlooking is indisputable, which one assumes is therefore sufficient grounds to reject the application. Refer to Sid Valley Neighbourhood Plan Policy 6 and EDLP Strategy 23-2. Although the privacy issue is undeniable, should the committee decide upon recommending conditions of mitigation, I believe the proposed height of the screen should be increased from 1.75 metres to 1.9 metres above the finished level of the terrace. Also, a standard hit and miss fence would not prevent overlooking, but vision may be restricted by incorporating wider slats at reduced spacing. There was no mention in this report of relocating our power and telephone lines or any fire risk associated with the exterior wood structures located next to the kitchen. Following the Barking balcony fire last year, we would expect the timber extension to comply with Eurocode EN 1991-2. And that's the end of the statement.
Thank you, Wendy. We have the ward member, Councillor Kathy Gardner. Is Kathy there?
I am indeed. Good morning.
Good
Chair.
morning.
Yes, my concern is absolutely related to the overlooking issue, and I know that privacy is such a difficult thing to judge from a planning perspective, but my concern relates to the picture that you see of the front, that picture there, because although there are windows on the side of the house at the moment, the balcony idea is completely new and would bring people out onto that level on a frequent basis. That's the only purpose it's been proposed as part of the sale of the property. It's in the sales description that this will go through planning. And I think it does have a detrimental impact on the life of the people living at Harmony, and is more impactful from this angle than may be apparent from the other photographs that you've seen on the application. So I ask you to give this due consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Right, members, Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've looked at this and given this quite a bit of thought. If members look at the picture that's in front of us on the screen, I take it we're all looking at the same one. You'll see that where the circle is, where they want to put the balcony, that if you take that wall from that end all the way across to the next little window, you'll see that it's a very small window. And if you come down, actually, you'll see that lots of it is blank wall, and there's another little on the grey building below, a little tiny small window. And then as you come back into the garden, which is more obscured by trees and foliage and the like, you'll see the very reasoning for that house being there is that the overlooking onto the property from where we're looking up from is done through a planning reason. I'm actually of the opinion that I think I'm going to agree with Councillor Gardner, and I feel that this is an intrusion and it doesn't sit particularly comfortably with me. Now, I understand that they're going to put up a screen, but as Councillor Gardner pointed out quite correctly, you'd hardly put on a base to sit up on and build it around that if you weren't intending to sit there. And I think there is really quite a big impact on this house. And one of the arguments you can use is the very small windows and the non-existence of windows on the side of the house is because of that impact and was done on that basis, and quite rightly so. And I think now to put a flooring up there, that's okay, that's good, yeah. And moving on, put a flooring up there. I absolutely understand from the house why you'd want to do that to have the view, and I get that. I think I would want to listen to ask Mr. Rose that what would be the impact, Mr. Rose, on a refusal here? Because I'm going to listen to other members, but I may very well be recommending a refusal on this application. But what I want to know before I do that is the impact of that and what that means for the impending council, because obviously if we're going to be in a no-win situation, I certainly don't want to put the council into a particular place. But we are a committee. We do discuss things. We look at things in the cold light of day as they sit in front of us. And from where I'm sat at the moment, it doesn't sit particularly comfortably with me. I'll leave it to that, Madam Chairman. I'd like to hear from Mr. Rose. I need to know from Mr. Rose what the impact of a refusal is.
Mr. Rose. Mr. Rose, are you still having problems?
Hello?
Hello?
Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Great, thank you. So yeah, so if we felt that we could justify a refusal, then that would have been our recommendation. We feel that a small balcony area up here, balustrade across the front, allowing them to look out and get the views, will have no more harmful impact on the neighbours than they're getting from these windows at the moment. And we feel that the 1.75 metre high privacy screen will prevent any overlooking back towards this property. Now, if members felt that the 1.75 high was an issue, or if the hit and miss design of that screen was of concern, then you could be justified in refusing it at those grounds, or more likely condition that there be a different height screen or different design of privacy screen. But I think by the fact that they're putting a privacy screen here and there's already windows that overlook, it's going to make defending an appeal very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, on that basis, could I just know I've had that from Mr. Rose? Could I suggest that I don't feel 1.75 is quite enough, and that what I may suggest is if we go forward with a recommendation of approval, that the conditions around the privacy screen is more privacy than what is recommended at the moment. I think I'm going to leave it to that for the minute. I'm not going to make a recommendation of refusal or anything else come to that. I'd just like to hear what other members have to say. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I think we have to deal with the application as it is, which is 1.7. So, Councillor Key.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, when I saw this first, I thought, what an attractive house. However, did they get that diabolical extension added on to it? I mean, it is disgusting.
Yeah.
When you actually look at the front of that house and you see that blot on the landscape. I mean, and really, to be quite honest, this screen is going to even make it worse. I mean, when you look at that to the front of the house, you think, what has happened to the house? They've ruined the house, really, to be quite honest. I mean, I've no objection to the bridge going across to there, because, I mean, it is quite steep at the back. As this stands at 1.7, I mean, we have to deal with this application. We can't say, okay, we'll approve it if they decide, or if we'll agree to it, because they could turn around and say, no, we're not going to agree to it. So in actual fact, I'm going to put forward that we actually refuse this and go back to the applicant and sort of say, well, look, you know, you're going to have to put it up another application with it higher. But no, I just certainly cannot accept this. It's even going to make the building look worse than what it is now, and I cannot accept it. And I'd be more than happy to put forward refusal.
Councillor Sam, happy to second that.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation to refuse, and the seconder, Councillor Desarum. Councillor Davey.
Well, I think Councillor Key has said most of it. I think the extension is described as unsympathetic in the report. I think Councillor Key summed it up a lot better. I mean, this is a building that's been vandalised already, and I feel this is just further vandalism. I don't have a problem with the access to the garden at the rear. I can quite see the reason for that, and that seems quite a sensible solution. The Juliet balconies, I think, would be better if they were sympathetic to the design. I cannot support these glass-fronted things, which will look modern on an otherwise very attractive building. I think if they were metal balconies, it could be supported. I think there is an impact on the amenity, even without the overlooking, and I accept that that is possibly questionable. Nobody's mentioned noise, and that is quite a sizable extension there. If you're going to put a terrace on top of that, there's nothing to stop somebody holding a party or a barbecue up there, and I think that could seriously impact on the neighbours, because noise from a height like that is going to carry. It's not going to be screened. I mean, I've had a look through policy D1, and it seems to me that it contravenes, and I can read them out if you like, number 1, 2, 3A, 3E, and 4C. And therefore, I have absolutely no hesitation in supporting refusal here, and I think we have good grounds to refuse, and I would hope an inspector would see the same.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Desarum, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. What I was going to say is that quite clearly, as it says on the report, that the building has already been extended in an unsympathetic way, and I think that I can't support further unsympathetic extensions, as Councillor Key said. And I think the reason for refusal will be that we don't like the design of the proposed screen, and we also feel that it would have a noise impact as policy D1, as Councillor Davey just mentioned. So for that reason, I haven't changed my opinions on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Yeah, I fully sympathise with the neighbour. I really do, and I understand their point of view. And probably if I was the neighbour, I'd be arguing the same. But, and there is a big but here, 1.75 metres is 6'9", roughly. Yeah, no, 5'9" in height. So you'd have to be 6'4" to look over the screen. There is no overlooking. It won't exist at 1.75, provided it is 1.75 metres above the ground level that is created on that roof. So I can't see any overlooking. I agree with most of the comments made regarding aesthetics, because this building has been absolutely slaughtered with that first, well, the 2 extensions, one either side, although the one on the right is far worse. But I suppose I'm warning membership. There is no overlooking. The overlooking will not be, we can't refuse it on overlooking. And sound, I get, Councillor Davey, but I go back to an application when Councillor Key was chair and I was vice chair, and we refused a balcony stroke, rear garden, terrace, whatever you want to call it, that was in Beer, I think it was. We refused it. It actually went to committee, got refused, and then was overturned by appeal, because overlooking is expected to a certain extent. Although there won't be any overlooking here. So it's aesthetics it comes down to. And I suspect we'll lose on appeal, but nevertheless, that's up to committee to decide.
Thank you. And I would say it does very much depend on the inspector at the time, because they can come to different decisions. So, Councillor Pook.
Thank you. I totally concur with everything that's been said about how disgusting extensions already there, but I have to sort of say we are where we are on this. I think it might be hard to object to making a balcony providing you retain the sort of the or make sure you're addressing overlooking. So am I right in understanding what Mr. Rose said, that we could approve with conditions, and the condition could be that that side screening could be solid and it could be higher? And I wonder if that conditioning could be that the balconies at the front, rather than being glass and modern looking, could at least try have a look to the traditional, or have something more cast iron or metal. So I'm just wondering if Mr. Rose could comment, if we approved, how far could our conditions change the application or condition the application as it is?
Mr. Rose, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a bit of flexibility in terms of the conditions we put on, but we shouldn't depart too far from what the applicant has put in front of us, which is a 1.75 meter high hit and miss timber screen. That there's some flexibility to put a condition into, maybe not necessarily amend that, but to change the condition to ask for details to be submitted. But I think if we're then also wanting to change the design of those screens and the balconies, then that's going just a bit beyond what we should be able to deal with by through a condition.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Well, everybody's commented how ugly it is, and I obviously agree with that. But I do think that actually raising that roof with a screen might actually enhance it, might give it a bit more proportion to the whole building. So I think we wouldn't be adding, we might actually enhance what's there, especially from this side. With regard to overlooking, well, it's 1.75. If I was standing up, I wouldn't be able to look over that fence. And in any housing situation, there's some element of overlooking. So actually, I'm going to recommend we follow the officer's recommendation and would approve the application.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Sorry, and only just finally, and thank you, Madam Chairman, for letting me come back, because actually this is the dilemma I was in when I started this journey, is that I feel very strongly, like many members do, that I'd like to refuse this application. I really do. Councillor Howe makes a very good point. It's all right sitting here, us refusing an application, but where does that end up, and where do we get from a refusal? I feel quite strongly about this, and all the things Councillor Key and other members have mentioned. The building has been, I mean, it's really sad that the building's taken on like this, but that is the past. That we are where we are, and we have to deal with this as it is. From what Councillor Pooch has suggested, which I thought was a very good suggestion going forward about trying to change the semantics as to how it's going to look, I'm getting from Councillor Rose and Mr. Rose, that that he's saying that if we're going to look to changing that may be a step too far. I think clarity on that, because what I think I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to support this application and go with the officer's recommendation, because I don't think we can do anything else. But what I do think is that I would like to think that we could have done something on the lines of what Councillor Pook was speaking about, because I think it's a very, very good suggestion. If we have an opportunity to do that here and there, I'd like to hear what that is. But as much as I would like to go for refusal, I don't think we'll get anywhere with that. And I think we'd be on the wrong side. I think Councillor Harris made a very, very good point. So, and the last speaker as well. So I just want to, I wonder if Mr. Rose might, for the benefit of everybody, so the question is, would we, through a conditioning process, if we approve this with a condition, because we need to be clear on the condition as we approve, would we be able to have it more aesthetically with metal and some different designs? Of course, I don't have that to hand. Is that something we could do or not really? Because that's where I would like to think that if we approved, at least we got into a better place than we are at the moment.
Mr. Rose, would you like to come back?
So I think if we're getting to the point where we're looking to change the design of those screens, potentially the height and the balustrades across the front of the windows, then that goes beyond what we could do through a condition. So I think you either need to make the decision on the basis of what's in front of you, or I suppose the other option is you could defer it to go away and negotiate. But I don't think it's certainly not something I'd be comfortable with that amount of changes through a condition, because that's really changing the heart of what they're applying for.
Madam Chairman, on that basis, could I please put forward a suggestion of deferral and see if I may get a supporter for that?
That's an amendment to the proposal.
Yes, please. I would like.
Is there a seconder for that amendment?
I will second that, Councillor Ragg.
Sorry, is that Councillor Howe?
It's Councillor Whibley.
Councillor Whibley. Right, we'll take the amendment first. But first of all, Shirley, can you sum up, please?
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Key.
Madam Chairman, if that's going to be the optional proposal, I'm more than happy in actual fact to withdraw the refusal to go with the deferral.
I would support Councillor Key on that. Councillor Serem, I would propose to support what Councillor Key has just said.
Okay, then that becomes the substantive motion to defer. Now, Shirley, can you sum up, please?
Yes, members. The motion is to defer the consideration of this matter until the planning department have had the opportunity to go back to the applicant to discuss amending the design of the balustrade and the oh, it's completely gone out of my mind now. Chris, it was the balustrade and the screening.
Balustrade, the design and height of the screening to the balcony.
Screening, yes.
And its design.
Sorry, members.
Thank you.
If, when your name is called, you could indicate whether you support or against, or whether you are abstaining.
Councillor Brown.
Support.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support.
Councillor Davey.
Support.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support defer.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Support.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Against.
Councillor Ragg.
Abstain.
Thank you. I can confirm the motion to defer is carried.
Thank you. And could I thank Mr. Cooper for attending and hope that he recovers soon. And thank you to Wendy for reading out his representation at such very short notice. Thank you. Right. Now we come on to agenda item 9, planning application 201049, full Court Hall, Monkton, pages 36 to 47. And I think Councillor Brown, are you leaving the meeting for the waiting room?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I've put Councillor Brown in the waiting room.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Right, Mr. Matthew Dalton Aram. Hope I've got that name right. Is he here?
He is.
He is, yeah.
Okay. Welcome to the meeting, Mr. Dalton Aram. You'll have 3 minutes to give your presentation. But first of all, you'll get a 30-second warning before the end of your representation. But before that, I'll ask Mr. Rose to present the case, the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so this is Court Hall in Monkton. It's an application for conversion of a guest house to a single dwelling. This here is the ward member is the applicant, and they live on site in part of the building at the moment. It's so you can see the location of the site here off the main A30, and the floor plans are in front of you. So 7-bedroom guest house, part of which is applicants part within the building the applicant already lives. So there's no changes internally to the building, but there is part of the application removal of a large, quite unsightly external flue, which you can see in these photos there. But other than that, the site remains unchanged. And as you can see, it's a very large detached property in Monkton, so there's no built-up area boundary, and you can see it's off the main road. So in effect, it's conversion of this building to a single residential use and removal of that flue. In terms of the principle of development, sites outside of any built-up area boundary, and as you're aware, strategy 7 of the local plan says that you need some policy support for schemes to be acceptable in the countryside location, which this is. And in this case, there's policy D8 is relevant. So that allows the conversions of existing buildings in the countryside, subject to a number of criteria. And certainly in this case, the proposal complies with criteria, some of the criteria, or its criteria in terms of enhancing the building through the loss of the flue. Building is structurally sound, the form and design is acceptable because there's no changes to that. There's no traffic harm, and the building is not required for agriculture because it's not in agricultural use. The main criteria to that policy that the report focuses on is whether the proposal is close to a range of services and facilities. Well, it's not in this case close to a range of services and facilities. So from that point of view, the location is unsustainable. But in this instance, that's not considered to be relevant because the applicant already lives on site. So we aren't creating an additional residential unit, or we aren't creating any more additional residential units. So in terms of sustainability, the applicant lives there at the moment. The applicant can continue to live there, so there won't be any extra demand on the use of cars or vehicles. So from that point of view, the proposal is considered to comply with policy D8 of the local plan. You'll also see the report then goes on to talk about the potential loss of tourism from the proposal. Policy E18 relates to the loss of holiday accommodation, but it only protects it in our main settlements. So that policy, our main seaside towns, so that policy isn't relevant to this application. And then we're on to strategy 32 of the local plan and its relevance, because that policy seeks to resist the loss of employment and community uses. Now there's 4 criteria to that policy that need to be applied, but before those criteria get applied, it needs to be established whether the proposal would harm community gathering or employment opportunities in the area. Now, there's no community gathering as part of the proposal, so there's no conflict with that part of the property, but then an assessment's required of whether there's potential to lose employment opportunities through the loss of the facility from its guest house use. Now, the facility's closed, has been closed since, well, just before the coronavirus, I believe, and there's no employees. So the applicant were the main employees. There has been some reference to some seasonal part-time jobs on occasions, but in effect, it's not considered that the proposal is going to result in any loss of job opportunities. The applicant, in terms of the value of the site for employment opportunities, the applicants provided details of old marketing back in 2013-14, quite a lot of detail on competition in the area from Premier Inn and other hotel facilities, that the facility isn't large enough for the larger hotel chains to be interested in it, that there's uncertainty over the future of the A30 because there have been proposals, or still are proposals from Devon County to divert the A30. That the building's not large enough for expansion. They provided details of how the proposal's not been viable for a couple of years, and obviously there's stated there's limited employment opportunities going forward. You'll see from the report that the council's economic development officer has taken the view that the marketing that the application doesn't comply with strategy 32 if 12 months marketing is required to be submitted for the application. But given the circumstances we're in at the moment with coronavirus, in this case, for this proposal, it's considered that there be a limited benefit in carrying out a marketing exercise at this moment in time. So officers are of the view that in terms of strategy 32, it's not considered that the proposal would result in the loss of a community use, and it's considered that the loss of the employment generated from the site is zero or at the very most minimal, and therefore it isn't really going to lead to a loss of employment opportunities such that the proposal requires the full 12 months marketing to see if there's any interest in the building. And given that, and given the circumstances outlined by the applicant regarding the size of the site, the location of the A30 and lack of interest for other hotel people, it's considered that the proposal does comply with strategy 32, as it won't result in the loss of any community or employment opportunities. So in light of that, and considered that there's no other harm identified from the proposal, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Mr. Daltamarum, you have 3 minutes to speak. Hello?
You're on mute, Mr. Daltamarum.
There we go. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Grateful for the officer's support for the proposal. The holiday accommodation sector has become increasingly competitive, particularly with the introduction of websites such as Airbnb, meaning hotels and guest houses have found it hard to maintain profitability and viability. The applicant's guest house has not been in profit since the 2013-2014 financial year and has only survived as the applicants have invested their own money in the business. Larger hotels have also opened in the area, including the Hampton by Hilton next to Exeter Airport, along with the Premier Inns at Honiton and Seaton. These national companies make it difficult for smaller boutique hotels and guest houses as they can provide cheaper accommodation. These difficulties have been compounded by the coronavirus pandemic, and the applicants have decided to close the guest house and cease trading. There is no local plan policy which prevents the loss of holiday accommodation outside of the district's 4 main resorts. The loss of employment would not be significant locally, as Court Hall has employed only the applicants with assistance from casual staff. Marketing evidence supporting the application details a previous marketing campaign which yielded little interest in the site as an ongoing concern due to issues with its size and location. We would query the Economic Development Officer's comment stating the position of this hotel right on the A30 may make it especially attractive to established hotel businesses who have approached East Devon seeking sites next to main roads with a minimum 40,000 vehicle movements per day. However, Department of Transport road traffic statistics measured at a point 300 metres to the southwest of the site highlight an annual average daily flow of vehicle traffic of around 16,000, 8,000 in each direction, significantly less than that stated by the Economic Development Officer. There are also double white lines outside of Court Hall, meaning it is only legally possible to access the site when driving from the north. Combined with uncertainties about changes to the A30's route, the site would actually represent a rather unattractive proposition for commercial operators. The applicants already reside in an owner's flat within the building, and the proposed change of use to a private dwelling house would not increase the overall number of residential units. Further, Court Hall was historically the manor house of Monkton and the country residence of Richard Somers Guard, a former Exeter MP and High Sheriff of Devon, who gifted land to build the Exeter Ram Museum. After his death, the family loaned the house to the church's vicarage.
30 seconds left.
Consequently, the proposal would effectively revert the building's use back to its original use as a dwelling, and we would respectfully therefore request that members approve the application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Ward Member, Councillor Key.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I got very little to say. One of the things that I would like to point out is, in actual fact, is the fact that the Economic Development Officer said about the minimum or businesses, the minimum of 40,000 vehicles a day. Wow, where are the vehicles? I can't see it in that picture there. And I don't know where he got his figures from, because when we had the meetings with regard to the improvement of the A3303, Devon County Council came up with figures for 25,000. And that was only 5-6 years ago. And I can't think that they've increased that much. Basically, what killed this property was the new Premier Inn at Honiton. And I remember the applicant sort of saying that knocked them very, very hard. I see no problem with this being reverting to a private house, and so put forward recommendation or approve the recommendation. Thank you.
I second that, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So it's been proposed by Councillor Key, seconded by Councillor Skinner. Councillor Skinner, your hand's up to speak next.
Yes, I don't know that there's an awful lot to add. It's really quite obvious and plain. I suppose the first issue I would say is I suppose we're declaring an interest that he is one of our members of our council is the first thing, and a member of our planning committee. And the second thing, of course, he's a member of our particular political group. Other than all that to one side, because he still is a man to make plan applications, of course, in the proper manner. And I'm supporting it on the basis of the grounds of the evidence that's been put forward to me. Reverting it back to a house makes no material change at all. He's going to remove the flue, and that, which looks to be like that, would probably be a good thing. The Premier Inn at Honiton, and I've spoken to Councillor Brown on many occasions about his business, how difficult he was finding out. And in fact, actually, it was mentioned earlier that it hasn't made a run into profit since 2013. It's been very difficult times, and particularly now. So I have no it's just a material change. And for me, I have no issue with this application whatsoever. And I think everything's been said both by the report and by Councillor Key. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's something that concerns me because it's not in one of the 4 principal areas for holiday accommodation. We're getting these on a regular basis now. And I think we're going to have to look at this when we draw up our new local plan, because people still do like to holiday in the rural areas, although they fall outside the principal holiday accommodation areas. So there, and I think Mr. Rose has agreed with me that there does seem to be a gap. So it's something that we will need to address when we revise our new local plan. Councillor Howe.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really about probity and planning and everything else. Obviously, Councillor Brown was my vice chairman while I was chair for a while. And as such, I find myself wondering whether I can make a just decision on this. So as such, I won't be voting on this at all.
Thank you. So you're declaring an interest, a personal interest?
It has to be a personal interest, but
yeah.
You know, you get a close working relationship with your vice chair, so it's hard to avoid.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howe. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, Councillor Brown is known to me as well, but I wouldn't say we have a close working relationship or anything like that. So this is some people who've run a guest house. It's in a nice position. It's on a busy road. But all they're asking really is, can we close down the guest house and occupy our own home? So I don't really have a problem with that. It is going to, I mean they are going from a small flat to a 6-bedroom house, or is it 7? 7. And I would presume this is a question for Mr. Rose, that any future subdivision of this, because it would be suitable for conversion into flats, that would require further applications, so there's no danger of that happening. And obviously that would also increase road traffic, but given that it's been a guest house, I don't see any increase in road traffic and car usage on the basis of this application, so I'm quite happy to support it.
Thank you. And Councillor Woodward.
Yes, I don't see how we can force the applicants to keep it open against their wishes and feel like they're in a penitentiary. So I'd fully support the application.
Thank you. And Councillor Key.
I would just like to point out, I mean, with regard to accommodation, I mean, in my area or in our area alone here, in the Otterhead and Dunkeswell ward, we have a tremendous amount of converted farm buildings, holiday lets, which in actual fact, the owners find it very, very difficult to let, because people have been going abroad and they want to, you know, sort of go to the coast. So a lot of them are struggling with the letting of those. So by this hotel or place closing is not going to make an awful lot of difference to people wanting to stay in the countryside. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, that's all the speakers. We've had a recommendation to approve and it's been seconded. Shirley, can you sum up, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Members, when your name is called, please would you indicate whether you support the motion to approve with conditions, whether you're against the motion or whether you are abstaining. Thank you very much.
Councillor Chamberlain.
I support the motion.
Councillor Davey.
Support.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support to approve with conditions.
Councillor Gazzard.
Abstain.
Councillor Howe.
Abstain.
Councillor Key.
Support approval.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Support.
Councillor Ragg.
Abstain.
With 8 votes to support, the motion has been approved.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Daltamarum, for attending. And we move on to agenda item 12. Planning application 20-0228 full Barnes at Barton Farm, Village Way, Aylesbury, page 75 to 95. And we have Mr. Daniel Bailey. Is he here?
Apologies.
Daniel
It's, yes. Yeah, it's that. Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Ragg, Daniel Allwood is about to join the meeting.
Thank you. Okay. Well, welcome to the meeting, Mr. Dalwood. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Wait a minute. Where are you? Oh.
Still connecting, I think, Chair.
I've got Mr. Graham Cooper again. Is that right? Never right, is it?
Are you on application 20-0228?
Yeah. It says Mr. Graham Cooper speaking as an objector, but he objected to one earlier.
Apologies, that's my mistake,
Okay, it's all
Chairman.
right. Just making sure I've got it right. Okay. Mr. Bailey, is he there?
Mr. Allwood's here, yes.
Mr. Allwood. I've got Mr. Bailey here as well. Okay, Mr. Dalwood.
Yeah, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
You'll have 3 minutes after Mr. Rose has given the presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Rose.
Thank you. Yeah, so this application is in Ellesmere, Barton Farm, and it's conversion of an agricultural building to 5 dwellings. It's here as there's comments, objection to the application from the ward member. As you can see from the plan, this is at the northern edge, but within the village. So farm buildings that are within the village, the built area. But Ellesmere doesn't have a built-up area boundary. So you can see the extent of the site there. And so we've got a building, it will become clear in the photos. There's one farm building here that gets converted to 4 units and one here that gets converted to a single unit. And there's a farmhouse here. So this is already a dwelling, this property here to the south. So we've got a sympathetic conversion, trying to use existing openings to create ground and first floor within this barn on this part of the site. So you can see the elevations there. So no extensions to the building within the existing fabric of that building. And then we've got 1 unit created in this building here. Again, conversion of the building, bit more conversion works here because this there's less structure to this building, but still enough to be converted. So this is the back of that building to the north. So this will be the rear of the units that converted to 4. And you can see to the distance there, properties on the opposite side of the road that are within the village. This is the rear of the site. So to the left here is the building I was just showing, and then that's the building to be converted to the single dwelling. So the single dwelling to the left, the terrace of 4, to the right, the terrace of 4 to the left. And if I just go back, you can see the remaining farm buildings to the rear of the site and the access road that I'll mention in a minute. So it's this group of buildings here, as I say, that terrace converted to 4, this building converted to a single dwelling. And you can see the existing dwelling that's to the south of that group at the moment. So these buildings off to the left. And these are the views from the main road. So this building for the 4, convert this building here to the single dwelling. And this is the view as you come up the main road towards that, the farm buildings, and looking back down the road, the building could be converted to 4 and the existing farm building that's there. So in terms of the principle of development, there's support in the NPPF. It promotes rural housing, and it also supports the conversion of buildings in rural areas where they would enhance the setting. Then there's no built-up area boundary to Ellesmere. So again, we're back to the policies that we've discussed a number of times before in terms of policy D8 of the local plan. And that has a number of criteria to it. So the first one is it of a sympathetic visual appearance? And in this case, it's considered that there's a sympathetic conversion of the buildings proposed. There's no large extensions to them. The existing openings are used. Sympathetic materials are proposed. Second criteria is whether the proposal is close to a range of services and facilities. And you'll see from the report that and from the ward members' comments that Ellesmere it only has a limited range of facilities, and the public transport in the area is fairly poor. But the village does have a village hall, a church, a public house, and playing fields. But as I say, no shop and no public transport. Now, we haven't had any similar proposals in Ellesmere. We've had no appeals on the basis of policy D8. So very much a balanced view here in terms of, and you'll see from the report that it's considered that, bearing in mind these buildings are within the settlement there, so within the houses and the buildings that are already there, given that there's a village hall, church, public house, playing fields, it's considered on balance that there is just enough facilities and services there in Ellesmere to support this application in principle, particularly given the sensitive design that's proposed and the support that gains through the NPPF. But I do understand the concerns of and comments of the ward member in terms of Ellesmere not benefiting from a large range of services and facilities. Going on to the other criteria to D8, the buildings have to be structurally sound, which they are, and as I mentioned, a suitable design, and this proposal does that in minimising the changes. And the conservation officer is happy because beyond these buildings here, there's a listed church, and they're happy with the way that the proposal's being subdivided. And you'll note from the report that there's no highway concerns raised. The other issue that is mentioned in the report is residential amenity, and there's no concern in relation to relationships with the surrounding properties. The concern you'll see in the report is more related to the conversions of these buildings and how the rear of them will relate to the remaining farm buildings in this access road. And you'll note that the environmental health officer originally raised some concerns about that relationship. But they've been addressed by the applicant submitting a legal agreement to say that these buildings will only be used for agricultural storage, so they won't be used for any uses that create noise or odour to an extent that could cause harm to the amenity of those occupiers. And the environmental health officer has accepted that position. In terms of ecology, you'll notice that there's evidence of bat roosts in one of the buildings, and that's there's a condition on there to mitigate against that and provide a replacement bat roost, and there would also be a license required from Natural England from the applicant. So it's considered the details of the application acceptable, and it just about complies with policy D8 in terms of Ellesmere having just enough services and facilities in the village to mean that this proposal is considered to be in a sustainable location, particularly given that there's support here for the design and improvement of the appearance of this building that's in the village. So due to that, the application is recommended for approval, but subject to that legal agreement to control the use of these buildings to the rear of the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Dolwood, are you there? Still?
Allward,
Hello?
yeah. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, you can. You have 3 minutes and you'll have a 30-second warning before the end.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, members. We're obviously delighted that officers are recommending our scheme for approval. We very much hope that you recognise the merits of the proposal, which have been designed to convert and enhance the otherwise redundant agricultural buildings to create a high quality, sensitive development that is in keeping with the rural character of the wider area, whilst contributing towards the much needed supply of housing. We note that the application is acceptable to both the County Highways Department and the Council's Conservation Officer. The initial concerns raised by the EHO relating to the ongoing use of the barns to the west of the application site and the associated noise and amenity impact have been addressed by the completion of a legal agreement, which has been served to the Council, limiting their use to the occasional storage of dry goods and the applicant agreeing to appropriate planning conditions. There are two key points that should be heard in the consideration of this planning application. Firstly, in practical terms, the scheme forms an obvious and logical infill development in the northern half of the village. The village has a number of its own community facilities, village hall, pub, playing field and church. It is very well located to support the facilities, services and amenities in nearby towns and villages. Therefore, Ellesmere has genuine credentials associated with a sustainable location when considered in its rural context. Secondly, the scheme being for the conversion of a disused and agricultural redundant rural buildings of considerable traditional character benefit for the support of both national and local planning policy. The proposals represent a wholly compliant scheme under the provisions of policy D8 that allow the conversion of buildings to residential use where located close to services and facilities, both in terms of the general criteria and the residential specific requirements of the policy. The proposals are consistent with the other relevant policies within the development plan, and there are also significant material considerations that provide strong justification for the application to be supported. A significant amount of time and care has been given to the design proposals, resulting in a comprehensive design solution for the site. We agree with officers' own analysis that the scheme is acceptable in terms of its design and would not result in a significant adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area or the setting of heritage assets, the residential amenity of occupiers of the surrounding properties, highway safety or ecology and biodiversity. It should be noted that in relation to ecology that the applicant has taken all the necessary steps to ensure the relevant surveys have been carried out and where appropriate mitigation measures incorporated into the proposals, namely a dedicated bat loft and integrated bat and bird boxes. In summary, we therefore strongly consider that development proposals comprehensively address all the design and technical issues while sitting harmoniously amongst the existing properties in the village. We would therefore urge you to support the recommendation of your officers and recommend approval for the scheme. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Allwood. We have Mr. Daniel Bailey. Is Mr. Bailey there?
Sorry, Chairman. It was meant to be Councillor Bailey, but she declined. So that was my mistake. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right, Wendy. So there are no ward members down to speak. So we go straight into committee then. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I know this site reasonably well and the way it's been put forward. There's just a couple of questions I have. I can fully understand why this farm has become redundant. I understand that part. The question I might have for Mr. Rose, so as I got a little bit of clarity, is that the farm buildings, you said earlier, Mr. Rose, that the farm buildings at the back, I don't know if we could move your photos to the farm building, that's it. I'm assuming those buildings on the left-hand side, that's what I assume we were talking about, and that they were going to be, there's a silo, looks like a bulk bin there behind, and they were going to be retained for agricultural use. I wonder if just before I get into too much debate, if you could just put a bit of clarity to that for me, please, because this is the reason I say this is because this is a farm buildings. It's obviously all closed down. There was a dairy farm here at one point. I do remember it, in sheep and the likes. And it looks like it's been derelict from that. So the farm buildings, I wonder if you could just elaborate on that a little bit for me, so as I could understand what the farm buildings are being retained for. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Skinner. Yeah, so the farm is vacant, if that's right. So what we're doing is, obviously, if you allow the conversion of the buildings to the right, that still means that those buildings to the left lawfully are in agricultural use. So somebody could move in at any time and use them for any agricultural purpose. Yeah. So what the legal agreement does, put forward by the applicant, is says that if this goes back into agricultural use, it can only be used for those storage uses that don't cause odour and noise nuisance, to protect the amenity of those residents. So if it does come back into agricultural use, then the amenity of those residents is protected, but it also means that those buildings can be used at some point in the future if they are required.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rose, for that. I wanted to be clear of that, because what we're looking here is looking to actually have these farm buildings, which would this unit here is going to be turned to residential use. And what I know doesn't particularly work particularly well, especially with the closeness of those buildings with the buildings that are in for the application, is agriculture taking place and farming taking place with the proximity of those buildings, with people living in those houses and farming carrying on right as close as what that is. So I was interested to understand what that was about. If it was used for storage, I guess that would be a slightly different issue. Madam Chairman, I think, like lots of these things and members, lots of these things, when we look at these things, and I wonder, Mr. Rose, if you could click through the picture a bit more with looking at the whole of the site itself, and that's a little bit more when we start looking at these things. If we actually were to go down to a route of refusal for this something such as this, you then tend to say to yourself, is what other use would they possibly be put to? One could be, for example, employment, but one would tend to ask the question, would you really have much of an employment use in a location such as Aylesbury? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know whether even that avenue has been gone down. But for me, I think to myself, looking on balance as to where it is, looking at the farm is derelict and it's gone, or it's become redundant. Sorry, not derelict, that's the wrong word. Become redundant from agricultural use. Madam Chairman, I'm going to put forward the recommendation with the officers, along with the officers, of a recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Madam Chairman, Councillor David Key.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Right, now we have Councillor Howe.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Aylesbury, I know Aylesbury very well. It isn't a particularly sustainable community, but it does have some services. And there is a reality, these are redundant buildings. What else is going to happen to them, as Councillor Skinner has said? So we need to find a use for them. And then you've got the village itself. If we don't put people into the villages, the current services that are already very limited are going to get even more limited because they won't have any customers. You know, it is a self-fulfilling, you know, way of doing things if we don't, particularly with our next local plan, put houses back in the villages. So as such, I'm more than happy to support this. If it wasn't redundant buildings, it would be a different matter, and I would agree with Councillor Bailey's opposition. But they are redundant buildings. They're being put back into a practical use, and I'd like to see people in them, you know, living and enjoying their life. So yes, more than happy.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, in actual fact, I mean, this was a tenanted dairy farm. And I mean, these buildings, I mean, I don't think I have to declare an interest because I knew the tenant, but he's now moved away because he was a tenant. But these buildings I knew quite well. And I mean, they structurally very, very sound. And the only way out of using these, I think, is in residential as being put forward. If we could you no need to go back to the picture, but the buildings that Councillor Skinner said would be used, it's very similar to Hayne Lane in actual fact, because the farmer who rented Hayne Farm has had to move because none of the buildings beside the new development there are able to have livestock in them. And so they're going to be used for other things, storage, and he's now moved away into another farm. But yes, I mean, it's good for these buildings because, I mean, sadly, otherwise they're just going to deteriorate and become, you know, sort of obsolete. And it's really going to make good use of them. And as I say, they are structurally very, very sound and going to be put to good use. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pook.
I was just going to fully support, and it's almost like a replication of the first application. Disused buildings used in a situation where it's marginally rural, but you've got good support all around. So I fully support the application.
Thank you. Councillor Desarum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to say, as Councillor Pook has said, that there are three positive things about the scheme. The fact that the scheme is considered to be sensitive to the historic fabric and use of existing things. There's just enough facilities, which answers that query, and it's a very sensitive design. And lastly, it will contribute to the supply of housing. So for those reasons, I think that it's a very positive application before us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Yes, I haven't got a great deal more to add to that. I mean, there are sustainability issues with this. It is going to lead to an increase in car usage because it's not a sustainable village. But as has already been suggested, additional building in villages could eventually lead to more facilities, or at least the sustaining of the facilities that are there. And Councillor Howe made a good point there. It's a sensitive conversion. Again, as has been pointed out, we're looking at a redundant farm building. And I think it makes a good conversion, good use of that building, no great extensions. And I'm also pleased to see that it's proposed to put in smaller housing, which we know there is a need for in East Devon. We're going to get 5 two-bedroom houses out of this. And by implication, those would be more affordable than some of the detached 5-bedroom properties that we see going on the market. So I'm very happy to support this.
Thank you. Well, that seems to be almost unanimously supported. Shirley, can you sum up, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members, you've got 2 elements to the recommendation before you to vote on. Firstly, to adopt the Habitat Regs appropriate assessment forming part of the report and approve the application with conditions and subject to the legal agreement. If you could please indicate when your name is called, whether you are in support, whether you're against, or whether you're abstaining.
Councillor Brown.
Support.
Councillor Chamberlain,
Support.
Councillor Davey,
Support.
Councillor De Sarum,
Support for both the elements, adopt the habitat regulations and approve with the application with conditions.
Councillor Gazzard,
Support.
Councillor Howe,
Support.
Councillor Key,
Approve both recommendations.
Councillor Pook,
Support both recommendations.
Councillor Skinner,
Support both recommendations.
Councillor Whibley,
Support.
Councillor Woodward,
Support.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
So that was unanimous, so that motion is carried.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Allwood, for attending. Now we move on to, unless you want a comfort break, I think the next one's going to be fairly rapid.
Go straight forward.
Yeah, okay. Application 201482 full and 201483 listed building consent. 3 Sunnyside, South Street, Colleton, page 26 to 35. Don't have anyone to speak on this, so Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application's here because it's an application by a member of staff. In fact, it's 2 applications, planning application and a listed building consent. And it's simply to take down a section of a listed garden wall and to rebuild that wall. So it's a 2-story, grade 2 listed building next to a grade 2 star listed building, and the wall was on the boundary of the 2. So just here, small piece of wall to be taken down. At the moment, it's got some unsympathetic concrete capping that's been on there many years, and the proposal is to put some church stone on top of that wall to break it back to as it used to be. So this is the wall from the applicant's side. So you can see it's starting to crack, and so it's over the boundary from here. These boys show it better, and growth going through it, unsympathetic concrete to the top. And if I just move on there, you can see the wall from the other side that's bowing. So they're proposing to rebuild it sympathetically, reusing the materials and putting the topping back on that matches this wall here to as it used to be. So very sympathetic proposal, protecting the future of the listed building and its wall, reusing the materials and putting it back to as it would have been. Therefore, both applications are recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I mean, very sympathetic toward this. It is a nice wall, and hopefully it'll look even better than what it does now. If it hadn't have been for the case that the applicant is a member of the office of East Devon District Council, I'm sure this would have gone under delegation. But yes, fully supportive of it and put forward the recommendation for approval.
Second, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So we need to now, which ones are you seconding? Because one's
Yes.
the building consent. Are you proposing both?
Yes,
Proposer?
I am proposing both, yes.
and I'll second both, yeah.
Thank you.
All done.
So can we take the application separately then, just to make it absolutely legal, watertight? So got Councillor Skinner next to speak.
It's all been said, Madam Chairman. It's just.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. So Shirley, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. If we could take the full planning permission reference 201482 full first. You have a motion to approve with conditions. If you could please indicate whether you are in support, you're against, or whether you are abstaining in the vote for that part of this application. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Approve. Both parts.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Support.
Councillor Davey.
Support.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support both parts.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Abstain.
Councillor Key.
Support.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Support.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
So for the full application, I can confirm the motion is carried.
If I can then put before members that the motion in relation to the listed building consents element of this, that you have the motion to approve subject to conditions. If you could please indicate your support, against or abstention when your name is called.
Councillor Brown.
Support.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support.
Councillor Davey.
Support.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Abstain.
Councillor Key.
Support.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Support.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. So the motion to approve the listed building consent has been carried.
Thank you. And so we come to the end of the meeting. I'd like to thank members and everyone else who's attended, watching online, for being here this morning. And I call the meeting to a close, but would remind you that the recording is still live. So just be careful what you say. Okay, thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Wendy and Amanda and Shirley and Chris, of course, for all your help. Thank you.
I'll let everyone know when the live stream has stopped.
Thank you.